You know, at the end of the day, I wanted to either stay home or go skiing, and I didn't do either one.
Oh.
Yeah, so. All right. I'm sorry?
Did you eat?
Did I do what?
Eat?
Did I eat?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
It's always something good.
That is true. Actually, I had one extraordinary meal during spring break. Okay, in no particular order, I am going to start with Jared. So what Jared, no, this is not Jared's version. This is my version of Jared. So hang on one second. Let's try that again. So what I got from Jared was, I'll show you really quickly because I want to show you, make sure everybody here understands how these things work. So this is just a copy of the image. This is not Jared's image at all. But what Jared did give me, what he put into the Dropbox, is the mesh that he generated from doing this. And so this is what the mesh looks like. It's a really small little text file. But I want to show you what it ultimately does and why they call it a mesh and why it's important and all that kind of stuff. So if we go back into Photoshop, I am going to go into, you'll see there's nothing on here. This is just a version copy of the file. It is a smart object, but that's all it is. But if I come up to Filter and I come down to Liquify and go into Liquify, one of the things that I can actually do is we need to talk really quickly about how Liquify actually works. And it all has to do with this mesh. So if you take a look at this, it looks like there's a screen on top of this girl. To hide that screen, you would uncheck the show mesh. To actually show it, you actually turn it on like this. You can change the size of your mesh. You can make it larger, which makes the spaces between them bigger, or smaller. The thing to think about the mesh is that this is how the Liquify tool works. The Liquify tool does not know that there is an image. It doesn't know anything about the image. It doesn't know that she has arms. It doesn't know that she has a head. It doesn't know any of that kind of stuff. All it knows is that it can manipulate a mesh. And so what happens is, the Liquify process, this mesh right here, imagine it like a screen. Imagine that you've taken an image, so the picture of the girl, and you've glued it onto this screen. And then what Photoshop does is it bends the screen. It doesn't know anything about the image, but it bends the screen. So when the screen gets bent, because the girl is glued to the screen, the girl gets bent. Does that make sense to everyone? So you can save these things. So if you also, you should just know you can change the color of these. So if you're, for instance, if you're working on a black and white image, the gray screen or the gray mesh is a little bit hard to see. I actually use the mesh a lot of times. I'll turn it on to look at things. It's a way that you can actually spot where some of your problems are and ways to actually fix them. Because again, the manipulation of the screen or the manipulation of the mesh is what's really controlling all of the liquefying that's on here. So I just wanted to show everybody that was what was going on. I'm going to turn this off really quickly. You can save your meshes once you make them. So once you actually do liquefy, you can click on this button right here that's called Save Mesh, and it will actually save the file that Jared actually turned in. You can also load meshes. So I'm going to click on Load Mesh and navigate to Jared's mesh right here and say Open. And you can see the liquefying has actually been done. So this was the liquefying that actually happened. So Jared, I just need to make sure, because when I did this, I wasn't certain, because you can save multiple versions of meshes. Was this your final mesh? Was this what you wanted to turn in? Okay, no, that's fine. It's fine. It didn't make any difference. But this is what I meant by being able to see what's going on in the mesh. If we turn it on right here, you can see that, you know, the things that he's ultimately done. So for instance, I feel like this shoulder is too high and sticking out too far, and you can actually spot that in the mesh right here. You can see what's been done. You can also see down in here, again, this would be the things that I would spot. He's thinned out the arm, but he's actually thinned it out much more in this upper region of her arm right here than he has down at the bottom. As a matter of fact, down at the bottom, he's actually made the arm heavier, and you can tell because the mesh is actually being pushed in this direction. So it's going in this direction, and it's going out in this direction. So you can spot things like that. I can also really quickly see whether he's done any work on the inside of the legs or the outside. So it looks like he tried to actually do a little bit of work here on the inside right here, but not on the other side right here. So again, without the mesh, you wouldn't necessarily know any of that was actually going on. So it's just something to keep in mind, to know and to understand about that whole part right there. So the thing that I wanted to talk about here, I'm actually going to show it to you in another one. So just in terms of loading and saving meshes, that'll get us through that part. So every now and then in this class, something will happen and I don't understand it. And Alex actually created a file and I don't understand it. And it's driving me nuts. So I don't know if any of you guys know a whole lot about this, but I'm going to show you what's driving me crazy. So if we take a look at the head right here, you can see that the head is actually distorted. It's obviously distorted. I'm going to just, so basically what Alex did was he used one set of liquefy to control the body. I will show you what that looks like really quickly. So I'm going to turn everybody else off, and so this is the work that was actually done on the body. And I'm fine with that. But then Alex goes and he does a completely separate set to actually do the head rotation. And he also liquefies that part here. And when I looked at it, I thought, well, the typical head rotation shouldn't bring in distortion, but there's distortion that's happening in here. And so I thought it had to come from the smart filters that are on here, the liquefy filters. But if I invert this mask, it gets rid of, you'll see the little bit that it does. The only thing these smart filters are really doing is narrowing the face a little bit. So then I thought, well, okay, it's a smart object. Maybe he liquefied something in the smart object. So I double click on the smart object to open it up. And you can see that this is an untransformed version of this head. So nothing has been done to the head that's inside the smart object. All the transforming has to be happening after the fact. So I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to turn everybody else off as well. If you then look, I'm going to do a command transform on this. If you look at the transform, you'll see he's done some transforming on this because I've got values up here that are not exactly 100%. So in my width and height, there's a little bit of distortion in here. There's a little more height than there is width in here, but that still doesn't explain the distortion in the face. I cannot find where the distortion is happening in this image. I don't know how you did it either. Because whatever transform that you did in here, because it's a smart object, would have to be a part of this. And I know you didn't do transforming before you created the smart object, because that would have to be here, inside. This would have to be distorted, and it isn't. So I have no idea. But every now and then shit comes along and stumps me, and I'm taking it from the rest of you guys. Nobody's jumping up to say, oh, I know why that is. Yeah, okay, great. You guys are all worthless. No. I want to show you Amanda's next. So it looks like, and I sent a lot of these things out to you guys just to sort of give you some idea of what I thought was going on. Again, some of this, it's relatively easy to see. Some of it is not so easy to see. But when I took a look at this, you can see that there's, I call this image tearing right here. If we zoom into this quite a bit right here, you can see that there's clearly some anomaly that's wrong right here that we would need to fix. If we take a look around at some of the other stuff, you'll see that there's other areas that the same sort of thing is happening in here. And my suspicion is that what happened was, and again, I don't know, so Amanda, you can tell me, this is another perfect example. It almost looks to me like you froze the inside of the leg and then you froze part of the red fabric and then you just did the motion in between the two frozen areas. Would that be a good guess? Oh, okay. Well, that kind of looks what's happening because you can see that there's such distortion that's happening in the red fabric, but it's a really small little space. So clearly the outside part was frozen. And then the tearing that's happening on the inside, like right in here, this is also a clear indication that this part of the leg has been frozen. So I'm thinking that's what happened. So anyway, it doesn't necessarily really matter. To find out which of these liquefy states are actually causing this problem, you have to turn off the eyeballs one by one. I was lucky and realized it is the second eyeball. It's this version of liquefy, and hopefully you'll see that it kicks out. The rewrite on this takes like forever. And oh, wait, there's a stamp above this. So now that's the version of it that was actually causing that tear out. Yeah, so to fix it, I'm going to simply double click on that liquefy state. And turn off the mesh. Zoom into this area. And I'm going to just freeze the inside of the leg. It's warning me to show the mask. This mask edge, I want a pretty hard edge on here, so I'm sort of in the 90s. So I'm going to put a decent line to go down here. And then I'm also going to freeze the zipper because I don't want to move that part. I'm going to uncheck show this mask so that I don't see it. And I'm going to grab the push to the left, actually the push to the left tool. I'm not going to use, and this was a thing that a lot of you guys ran into, is that when you were trying to do the leg, for instance, you would push in a little bit, 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 but it left a really lumpy leg. So again, in many cases, the push to the left tool is your better friend in that. So in this case, if we click on this and drag up, it should push things to the right. So I'm going to click and drag up. That's wrong. It's pushing them to the left. So I'm going to hit Command-Z to undo that. And instead, I'm going to click at the top and come down. And you can see it pushes in and it just takes care of the problem. Makes sense? So anyway, push to the left and the right are both really, really, really good things to keep in mind. Like I said, I think I told you guys in the beginning when we started working with this tool, it's the tool that most people actually go to first once they get really, really, really good at it. Sorry. This happened to a couple of people. I want to show you JP's really quick. So in JP's, he actually had the correct idea. The correct solution for how to rotate the head was to... So in this case, let me show you this part right down here. So this is where JP starts. Then he does his liquefying right here. Again, one of the downsides to what he did was that he started with a smart object, changed it to actually duplicated the layer, but then rasterized it. So this is no longer a smart object. So his liquefying is now baked into this, which isn't the end of the world. But had it been a smart object, it would have allowed him to continue to refine it and refine it and refine it. Then he actually uses cut and paste to actually thin the thighs out a little bit more. But you'll see one of the issues that he runs into right here is that this does not connect with the lower thigh anymore. So it's not that one. It's this one right here. So he adds that to fix the problem that existed with the liquefy issue right here. Again, had this been a smart object, he could have gone back in and actually fixed this part in the liquefy workspace. But what he does is he did have the right idea about flipping the head. So to actually flip the head, this is the point that he's at. Let me turn this on. Sorry. He actually copies and pastes the head, the original head, and rotates it, and then starts to blend it back into the body. And that was the correct way to do it. The problem that he runs into is this. That's the head by itself, but I'm going to turn off the mask. And this was his problem. He cut the hair too short. So and when he actually did the part, so he just jumped the face to its own layer. But then he lost all the hair to actually, now he has to reblend this hair to go back into the to the body that's underneath it, and he'll have to do the same thing on the other side. So for me, looking at this, the only decent thing that you've got really to work with here are the facial features. The face itself, the hair's never going to blend back in. And if you take a look at his final composite, you can see he sort of gave up on it as well, because this is clearly not blended back into the rest of the body. And it's the same issue going on here. So right idea, but this is what I keep telling you guys to think of, is that when you do a selection like this, so if I was going to rotate the head, instead of making a very small selection like that, I would actually grab the lasso tool and I would grab a big old chunk of this, like this. And this would be what I would rotate. And that gives me all sorts of material to then blend it back into the original body. I've got a lot of her shirt. I've got a lot of her. Some people actually take a full copy of the body and rotate the entire body so that they can then blend it back in. And if they need to blend part of the new rotated body, they can liquefy that to actually get it to all match up. But if you make a selection that's too small to begin with, you're hamstrung. There's nothing to do except do it over again. Make sense? I want to take a look at Robin's really quickly. So in Robin's, and this is again one of the tricky things that you run into doing with Liquify, is that I'm going to show you the before and after on this really fast. I'm specifically looking at the elbows, and the trick is that it's when you're doing this kind of work, it happens, it's especially in this assignment, it happens with the arms and it also happens with the legs. It's not enough just to start pushing in from the outside. You need to actually draw in from the inside as well, but most importantly is you need to keep the original shape that happens in the arms. And so if you take a look at my elbow right now, or the way that my elbow is it bends at an angle. There's definitely two pieces right here that disconnect, and there's a joint. And so I need to respect that part. And what happens if you take a look at Robbins is that when he started to push in the top and the bottom, he actually rounds the elbows off, and she becomes Gumby. So you can see they're completely rounded off, and that's just not how an elbow would ever be. I don't care what's ever happened to the person, unless somebody's gone in there and yanked the bones out of her arm and it's just a tube. But at any rate, it's just something to keep in mind. Again, a lot of it happens in the legs. When you guys were thinning out the legs, they completely lose their shape. They become really stick straight or something like that. All of that, you need to continue to think about, how does this body really look? Do those legs, does a leg have shape to it? Does it have legs? Typically, the calf part of it is a little bit wider than the shin part of it. So it's just things that you need to keep in mind. Think like an illustrator, even though that's why none of us are illustrators, as we're all into photography, because it's what? It's easier. If anybody tells you that, punch them right in the face and just tell them it was from me. Okay, we don't need that. I do want to show you a couple of versions of this that I thought were exceptionally well done. In no particular order. And they're all variations on exactly the same theme. So this is Sophie's right here, and this is again how it started. This was her initial liquefying here to, again, narrow down the body, thin down the body. And again, I wasn't looking for this to be, you know, skinny girl kind of thing, whatever. This was just, you know, getting into doing reasonable modification, that sort of thing. But then this is her hair spin. And you can actually see, again, it's exactly the thing that I was talking about. I'm going to turn the mask off. So this was her, again, I would say she probably trimmed it a little too close, but she comes in, she has a good recovery for this. So bring that back on. And then if we take a look at her hair fix, because this is where things need to come back together. So this was what was actually going on. And then this is how she ultimately fixes it. And there's also the mask is still turned off, so that's the mask part. And you can see this is pretty flawlessly done. So the only thing that I would consider doing after this, and this is really gilding the lily. So you guys should know this about me as well. A lot of times you'll reach a point like this, and so what's now made this up is she's got original liquefy for the body, she's got her head turn, which is on a completely separate grouping layer, and then she's got this hair fix, which blends in the old with the new, and she does a really good job. I mean, that part works out really successful. So, but there's 3 now sets of layers that are on this, and I need to liquefy the entire body intact. So that's again when you would go up to your very topmost layer, select, so I've got the hair layer selected at the top, Command Option Shift and the letter E creates a merge stamp version of everything. This is not really a new version. This is sort of a very close to where I want to be at the end. But then at this stage of the game, I would convert this to a smart object. And then liquefy this. So I'm going to come in and add liquefy on it. And the only thing that I would do on this, again, if you think about the physics of it all, there is a good chance, and it's a cheat to sort of like hide some of your hair work, although the hair stuff was, I mean, the matchup was really well done. But I would actually do a push to the left tool, make it pretty good size. My setup is pretty good there, even bigger on this. And I would just start to push the hair in a little bit just to give it a little bit of a curl the way hair would actually hang. And so it's a very subtle move. That's all it is. But again, it's how it would really be and it would work. And so at any rate, that one was really well done. Olivia's also really well done. And finally, Gemma's was also really well done. Maybe not quite as much of a hair twist, a head twist, whatever, but in some ways, not having it perfectly straight up and down makes it almost more believable. And it was still every bit as ambitious. But so at any rate, you guys crushed that. I want to show you 2 other things really quick, and then we'll take a fast break. So I'm going to go back. This is something I keep talking to you about it. I just want to point it out again. This is actually in the knockout assignment part that we were talking about. And it's Evans right here. Does anybody spot anything wrong with this? I am actually going to just show the mask to the knockout mask on this. So I'm going to hold down the Option key and click on it. Now, does anybody see anything wrong with this? Look at all the contamination in the mask. And again, when you first look at this, you don't see that necessarily, but if you look at the mask by itself, you'll spot that a mile away. So the easy way to fix it, the B key to get a brush, change it to overlay. I'm going to leave the flow all the way up. White is my foreground color. Really big brush, and just paint over all of that, and it's done. Are we good on this part? On a similar note, in Gemma's version of that same file, when I look at this, it looked to me like, again, her knockout is pretty good, but when I look at the hair, I feel like I've got a lot of texture that's up here in the top, but I lose all of it. I've got the outline, but I really lose that sort of sense of texture. Again, if you look at the mask by itself, you can sort of spot what the problem might be in here. There's a lot of that sort of gray tone in here. It needs to have more texture in it. So I'm going to show you how I would do this. Again, I'm going to do this with an overlay brush. I'm going to drop my flow down though to around 10, something like that. Again, this is a mask. What I need to do is show more texture, so I want to be painting with white, not with black. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller. And then again, with only a 10% flow set to overlay, it will only build in tone. And so it's sort of like I'm dodging it in. So this is now my before and after. And you can see it's restored an enormous amount of the hair detail part to it. And it's just a really quick fix. Are we good on this part? Are there any questions about any of this part? Okay, it's 2:30. Let's do a quick 10-minute break, hard break, be back at 2:40, and we will pick up where we left off last week.